I'm about to be dragged for saying this or not. Maybe it's because I was in prison for a decade and I just didn't see society evolve, but I took my son to the pediatrician. This happened and I'm highly effing offended. Okay, so my son plays sports. In order to be actively participating in the sports at school, you have to have a sports physical on file every single year. I took him to the pediatrician for this sports physical. Whenever any of us go to a doctor's visit, we all know that they do the triage. They do the blood pressure, the height, the weight, and all that right when you get there. And so when we get there, they're going to take him to do the triage like they do any other time. What ended up happening was they put us in a room without doing triage. When they put us in the room, they called my son out by himself, and she was like, oh, we're just gonna go do the weight and the height and everything. And I was like, okay, cool, no problem. They took him around the corner and I could see like the side of his chair and I could see like half of his body, but I couldn't see like the little nook that she was in where she was writing everything down. You know, it was not a big deal, but I kind of just stuck my head out, just a peek. You know, I'm a mom and I'm nosy. I've been in prison. Like, I want to see what's going on. So I'm just standing in the doorway of the patient room and I'm like watching him. I end up seeing that after she does the blood pressure, the height, and the weight, she ends up handing him a clipboard with a piece of paper. In my mind, I'm like, oh, that's peculiar. Number one, I've already answered all the health questions, like the medical history. Number two, why would you give it to a 12-year-old kid? Like, he doesn't know his medical history. But again, like, I've already answered all that. So what the heck is that form? But I did want to help. So I thought, let me walk over there and just make sure he doesn't need my help with any of these questions. I end up walking over there. I look over his shoulder and I see that, you know, he's checking things off and he's answering questions. And I'm like, all right, good job, babe. Like, you know, you're answering everything on your own. You've got this. You're growing into a great little man, very independent, self-sufficient. It's all good. I'm going to leave it alone. I'll talk to him about what they were asking later and make sure that he understands the severity of answering these questions accurately, because it has to do with health, or so I thought. So I walk away and I go back into the room. About a minute or so later, he comes back in the room with the nurse and he sits down. The nurse closes the door and she's like, the doctor will be in a minute. Before I could even utter one word, my son looks at me and says, Mom, that was the weirdest form I've ever had to fill out. Of course, now my interest is piqued and I'm like, what kind of form was it? He's like, they asked me if I was gay, straight, or bisexual. They asked me if I felt like I was the gender that I was assigned to at birth. They asked me if I ever felt like I was a different gender. They asked me what gender I identify best with, how much I ate every day, how many hours I slept, and things that I know that they ask during psych evaluations at the prison. That's where they ask you in that type of setting.
I would have went off. I would have went ballistic. Everybody in that office would have got a piece of my mind. And this is what happens because we've went super woke, and now people feel comfortable asking children these type of questions, and that's why they separate them from their parents, because they pushing an agenda. I would have went off. Ain't no way in the world that you would have ever been able to convince me to that this was logical. Why would they do, bro? Who would vote for this type of? Where are they in California? Gotta be in California. Has to be in California, because ain't no way in the world you can convince me that they are allowed to do this legally and that they're able to get away with it. And I can only imagine how shocked that she was, because, you know, with her being out of jail or being, she said she went to prison for 10 years, for her doing that bid and that stint, she probably like just completely confused on what's going on out in these streets. But I would have went ballistic. Ain't no way in hell that you can convince me that this makes sense, or that this is a thing, or that this is what these kids is going through and they suffering through this nonsense. Man, I would have been crazy. Did you really just ask my child this? Did you really think that this was going to play out the way that it played out? What laws allow for you to ask your children this type of question? This should be a lawsuit, honestly. She said that they asked him if does he feel like his gender that was assigned at birth? This is how I know it's an agenda, all the way from the top. They are trying to feminize people. It's a social experiment, and eventually they're going to push some other wild stuff on us, and they're going to try to justify it by using a logic that allowed for y'all to be able to get away with a lot of this stuff in the first place. Y'all need to pray, and people need to absolutely get involved with their legislation. And y'all said, oh man, it didn't apply to me, and now you got a chick taking her kid to the doctor that's 12 years old, and they asking them about their gender.
Like in mental health settings, everything was kind of weird at that moment, and in my mind I instantly got pissed the hell off. So the doctor comes in a few minutes later and I'm like, hey doc, I don't know when you guys started this, but I don't appreciate you guys giving a 12-year-old that form,
Correct.
particularly my 12-year-old, when you don't know if that subject matter has been even discussed in our household. You don't know if he knows what these words and terms mean. For the record, he does. I mean, I think most 12-year-olds probably do, but that's besides the point. They don't know that. You don't know if now I'm going to have a conversation with my child discussing why he's being asked this, what the relevance is to his life, and explaining things that he may not have previously known and I didn't want to discuss just yet because I didn't think it was age appropriate. You can't make that generalization, because the reality is that 12-year-olds, most of them are not engaging in sexual behavior, and everything they hear is just from social media. They don't even know a lot of the time at that age, like, what actual real information is, like what is legit and what they just hear on social media and from their friends. They might not know what your birth assignment was. They might not know what transitioning is. And why would they if it hasn't been something that's come up in their household before? And you wouldn't know that because you didn't bother to ask. So at the very least, I would have appreciated if you would have brought that to me, said, hey mom, scan this real quick. If you're okay with us giving it to your child, then, you know, we would like to. And that would
I would have been angry as hell.
You did it in a sneaky way. You put us in the room together. Then you called him out by himself. Yep. And then you gave him this form, this very explicit form with very detailed, personal, invasive questions. And you didn't even bother to give me a heads up. What if we had never discussed that before and he got in the car and now all of a sudden he wanted to know all these things and I was thinking that it's not age appropriate. I was going to wait till he was 14 or 15 and now you've just created a problem. Or what if you have a very impressionable and naive child and now...
Why does she think that this is something that was outrageous when she first started the video? I wouldn't have thought that her reaction was outrageous whatsoever. Actually, I think that she's being way more reasonable than most people would have. Most people would have went ballistic. Man, what the... I wouldn't even have stayed at that doctor. I'd have left out. I'd have left out, and then I would have protested them actually charging me or the insurance companies.
You actually have planted a seed to where they're going to go searching. So she's like, oh, well, you know, we just want to be inclusive and afford the opportunity for every kid to feel comfortable. And I said, I understand inclusivity and I understand leaving your child behind or their feelings. That's valid. But there's a difference between recognizing that a child needs to talk to somebody about something that they may not be able to talk about at home and introducing subject matter and planning a seed about something that has never come up. And you wouldn't know what case you're dealing with because you didn't bother to ask the parent. I flipped out. I left. I'm not going back. When did they just start discarding the parent role in this whole situation? You're going to take a 12-year-old's word on all of...
Y'all got to start protesting against this type of stuff if you're going to protest about anything. No, we too woke. Listen, we need to be inclusive of anybody regardless of how they identify, even if it's a little child.
Stuff without even consulting the parent. What if he would have answered those questions crazy because they didn't even know what the hell was going on? And then now there's a case of, oh, the parents not wanting this or not allowing that, but we're going to still take this kid. And like, what? My mind's angry as hell. So I just want to know what you guys think.
And where's the father at? Where is the father at? Because the father needs to know about this so that the father can go up there and check out on them and help them to understand that you can't do that with no kid and separate them from their parents.
Phobic this and phobic that. I'm not. When you take a child to go do something without the parent's knowledge or consent, it feels very sneaky and very shady, and I didn't appreciate it. Okay? It felt like there was some kind of agenda or narrative that was underlying here, that was being pushed upon my child that I was not aware of, and I don't approve. I figured I could get some insight from the world and just see, I don't know, just put some feelers out there, you know, before I blow a gasket and go prison.
No, you're not wrong. You're absolutely right. And I think that your kid should have witnessed you going crazy because now they've planted that seed in your child's head because that memory and that thought is going to live with him for the rest of his life. Let me know what y'all think inside of the comments. Make sure y'all tap into the Patreon. Link is in the description. Teach Henley 40% off your first order, 20% off for life. I want to know what y'all thoughts are. How would you have handled this?